Hi, everyone. This is the second episode of Bamboo and Biltong. Today, we've got Tobie Openshaw with us. He's a SADF vet living in Taiwan, long-time resident. Also with us, we've got John. John, how are you doing today?
Well, thank you.
Good. All right, Toby. You have a you've had quite an interesting life, and
It's not over
you
yet.
and all right, I think you're in that position where, as a kid, your older brother was in the SAP serving in Rhodesia. So you've got. We'll start off with that. If you want to share with us a little bit about what it was like as a kid in an Afrikaans family with an older brother in Rhodesia. What you remember about that? Was there any impact on your parents? And then I think from there, then we can move on to your own national service.
Okay. Yeah, cool. Thank you very much for the invite, guys. It's really my pleasure to be here. And, I've only relatively recently actually really started talking about this stuff about the going back to childhood and national service and those kind of things. And I think, like many veterans, you find that when you start talking about it, many new things come out and you start processing these things. And at the end of the day, it actually feels a whole lot better than to just try to sort of push it away. So yeah, I'm gonna just share my screen here. I brought along a few slides that I can show you guys. Yeah, all right. So I'm 61 years old at the moment, and I live in Taiwan. I've been here for 25 years. But so back in the 70s, and I'm not really sure what year, but I was living in Paarl at the time. So it must have been 73, 74, somewhere around there. My brother, who was 10 years older than me, was in the police. And, so my brother was kind of out of the house by the time I got my mind sort of thing. So we were never really close, but I really admired him. He was like, wow, he was my hero brother, And for my family too, the fact that he went to the police and he became a policeman, it was like, yeah, that's sort of what a man is supposed to do, And but then we heard that he got called up for duty in Rhodesia. And I mean, of course, the age that I was at then, I was like 10, 11, 12, something like that. I had no idea about the political ramifications and so on. All I know is that I remember hearing, even though the adults tried to hide it from us, but hearing the horrific stories, just absolutely horrific stories of the things that were going on in Zimbabwe and elsewhere also, like in the Belgian Congo, the Mau Mau rebellion, those kind of things. And that, that's what informed a lot of how we readied ourselves for this total onslaught and this war that we were gearing up for, So it was happening in Zimbabwe, but South Africa, this now, of course, only with hindsight now that I know these things a bit more about them. South Africa couldn't just send in troops into a foreign country to go and help them. And so the South African police were given COIN training, counterinsurgency training. They called it TAIN or COIN. And from what I know, it was not great training. It was quick. It was a couple of months, maybe I really don't know for sure. And then off they went and they got their camo uniforms, which was super cool at the time. And off they went to Rhodesia. And now, so I remember what I remember from my parents and especially from my mother was, yes, she was that, the proud mother whose son is going to go off to war, but of course also really, really worried. And but my parents, didn't share that with the rest of us kids. So we didn't really share their fear, right? But we just know from listening, waar kinders sit en tande tel, from listening to the adults talking and so on, that they're going, but they think it should probably be okay, they've been told it's not so serious, that kind of thing, And so then what I learned later from my brother and also just looking at things, it really seemed that these guys, they were not supposed to be like crack troops or anything like that. They were bodies. They were literally just there to fill gaps that the British South African police and the Rhodesian RLI and those people could not fulfill. John, so you're an ex-roadie, right? So can you maybe just fill in for me a little bit about what were those guys' orders? What were they really expected to do? Do you know?
Yeah, look, I was just a troopie in the Rhodesian Light Infantry in the RLI around about 1975. And I would say the most important role that we experienced was that they came over with a lot of choppers. Initially it was Alouettes and later things like Pumas and things like that. And the pilots were probably Air Force pilots, but
no insignia, right?
Wearing SAP uniforms.
That's right.
Yeah. And that was vitally important. That was a vitally important role. And I can remember on many occasions doing Fire Force operations with an SAP pilot at the helm. And they were competent, they were brave.
Right.
And so were their techs. And their chopper techs.
Yeah, the techs were always good. I had the same experience.
Usually the Rhodesian pilots and KCAR commander, which normally our army would be in control of the so yeah, in a way they fulfilled a vital role in plugging the gaps and adding warm bodies, but they came with great equipment.
Right.
And also just border control and that type of thing. They established camps and patrolled the area near where they had their camps and that sort of thing. And so that helped a lot, because we were very thin on the ground, obviously. Yeah.
So okay. So thanks for that. No, so that's jibes with what my brother was telling us, that making camps, staking in a position, patrolling that area, just having a presence, right?
Right.
But so there's two stories from my brother's time that when he came back, wow, here comes the conquering hero. I remember his uniform smelled of the bush, and so there were two incidents. So one is there was a group of terrorists were expected to come through a certain area, but they weren't sure exactly where. So they put like stopper groups down in various likely routes where these guys were supposed to come through. And as I understand it, my brother and his team, their orders were just to observe and to report if they saw these guys and report their position. And so they were dropped in, and this is where it comes in, right? They were dropped in by a Rhodesian Alouette, and maybe they were just like 5 guys, right? 4 or 5 guys. And they had rat packs with them, and they were supposed to stay there for like 7 days. And they were told, no fire, no sound, no noise, don't scare these guys, maintain your position, observe, and report if you see something. And he says, that what they usually would do when they made camp, when they made a teerbie, right, was they would first thing, they would go through their rat packs and throw out all the shit they don't want, like the uncooked rice and stuff like that. So they did that, and they made their teerbie, and now they're lying there, and they lie there for 5 days, and then it becomes 6 days, and then it becomes 7 days, and their relief is not coming. They're not getting picked up. And it turns out that the roadies thought the Safas were going to pick them up, and the Safas thought the roadies were going to pick them up, and it was just one of those classic miscommunications of war, and they sat there for another 4 days or something. So they were there for almost for 2 weeks. So they were running out of food. He said later they were scrabbling amongst the bushes where they threw away their dried rice and tea bags and shit so that for something to eat. And they were like, really, damn it, let's just shoot a buck, you know, or throw a grenade into the river and have some fish. They were trying all kinds of things to get something to eat that would be quiet, you know. And also because they were like in a gorge, and so they didn't have good radio comms. And so eventually, like on the 4th or 5th day after they were supposed to go, they just said, fuck it. And one of them climbed up the gorge, threw an antenna up into the tree, and got comms on the HF radio and said, hey, we're here. Where are you? And then they got picked up, you know. So I, like I say, it's a tiny little thing, but I think it's a very much an emblem of the kind of situation that war was in. It was kind of a mogetroffen, right? Everybody's doing the best they can, but there's not great communications and not great channels of comms and stuff like that, you know. So as you say, SAF pilots, but then with uniforms. Then the other incident was that he was actually in a landmine explosion. And I would say nowadays we would call it an IED. And so what happened was, I mean, the gear they had was basic, right? So they were driving in unimogs with sandbags on the back. That was the mine protection they had, you know?
Yeah.
And so they, the tourists had set a mine in the road, but they made an electrical switch for it out of a stick. It was forked like this with wire contacts, and they had that in the road and another stick lying on top of it. So when the vehicle drove over that stick, it would push the 2 points together and the mine would go. And the idea was, I mean, clever, you know, they planted that stick like about 2 meters ahead of the mine. So the idea was that the vehicle would drive over the mine and then set it off so that it would go right under the cabin rather than under the front wheel, you know. But, you know, God sei gedank, my brother, sorry, I don't mean to be flippant. My brother's vehicle came from the other side. So it tripped the mine, but the mine at that point was literally in front of the bumper of the vehicle. So it went up, the vehicle stood up on its back legs like this, and then came crashing down again, fortunately forward again. So a couple of guys were thrown out of the vehicle. A couple of guys had, like my brother had back injury, not serious, but, you know, hurt his back, and eardrums. There were perforated eardrums. He was deaf for quite a while afterwards. But he said, you know, it was just this incredible shock wave and sound, and then complete silence as the vehicle sort of bounced back down. And then they all just bailed out of the vehicle and into the bushes ready because they thought it was an ambush, you know. Fortunately, nothing. That was it. Boom, down back again, nothing. So nobody on the vehicle was killed. There were only 1 or 2 kind of serious injuries and then further light injuries. But so he got the police medal, the whatever version of the pro patria the police gives. He got that for being in a contact. I think it was defined as just being in a contact, you know. They don't do like a Purple Heart, you know. But so, yeah, so for us, that Rhodesia was way up there, but horrible things were happening there, according to what we heard. And we were doing what we can to support our Rhodesian friends and to stop that evil from coming into our country. That's the way we saw it at the time, you know.
Yeah, was there an element of sort of zwart gevaar?
Oh, of course. Oh, look, mate, when I was growing up, that was huge. It was, we were all going to be killed in our beds, man, you know.
Yeah.
Because like I say, you know, I've now in my old old years gotten very liberal-minded, and I'm absolutely for freedom and for everybody having human rights and all of that stuff. But growing up, it was like, I even remember, my brother probably won't like me telling this, but when he was just an SAP constable, telling of how they got information out of people by making them talk on the telephone. So they had the old wind-up telephone thing, and they would connect wires to the guy and shock him, you know. So they were totally actually torturing people and telling it to us as a family, and everyone, yeah, right, yeah, man, yeah, they deserve that, you know. That's the way to deal with that problem, you know. So, you know, I was thinking to come to this a little bit later in the talk, but for sure now I can mention that that's a big shock, you know, to your system, when at one day you wake up and you go like, hey, wait, no, that wasn't right. That was not the good thing to do. And why were everybody around that dinner table, adults and everybody, saying, yeah, this is the way to do things, you know? And that's how screwed up our mindset was. However, you know, with that said, like I said, to us, the horrific stories of, you know, nuns being raped and priests being, you know, having their genitals cut off, and just those horrific stories that was coming out of those places made us fearful and made us say, yeah, well, we got to do what we got to do to defend against this.
Yeah. Yeah, as you say, there was the first of all the mama in Kenya.
Yeah.
And you know, we got a lot of horrific stories about cannibalism and all kinds of things coming out of Kenya. And then when I was a young teenager, we had a missionary come and stay with us by the name of Harold Berry, and he was from the some evangelistic Bible, the Congo Evangelistic Mission, CEM, and he had managed to, they burnt his church down, they macheted to death all the elders of the church and all his congregation, and somehow he managed to escape, and they burnt his house and they took all his possessions, and he, when he came down from the Congo, he managed to get through I don't know how many roadblocks, and fortunately these rebels were drunk enough or whatever that he managed to get through, and he came to live with us because he had no possessions, and he had nowhere to stay, and he had no money. And he told us, and he was a strange guy. He spoke Chiluba, which is like and he lived in the jungle with these people, and he said once he went for 3 years without seeing another white man.
Wow.
And he said, you know, John, it was so hot in the jungle in the Congo that sometimes I had to take my tie off.
Oh, that's so classic, right?
Yeah. But you know, these memories, childhood memories, they kind of you know, make you more receptive to government propaganda and whatever, you know.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. So anyway, yeah, so that's really now I've since, you know, like I said, I'm not super close with my brother, but I've since asked him, and then he always answers very sort of non-committally. I don't think he had like a terrible time. I know of other SAP guys who said it was the greatest holiday they had. They lived on the river and they fished for catfish and you know, hunted, and they had tigerfish. That's right, and had a great time, you know. But I think for him, I mean, probably a little bit for us too. It's like, it's that idea of you come to some point where you think, well, actually, you were kind of on the wrong side of history, and what you did is not being recognized, or is actually being vilified, as it were. And so it's better to just not talk about it, you know. So I've only ever gotten sort of very little snippets from him when asking him about this. Right. Anyway, okay, so shall we continue?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so when I was like 14, 15, we were living in Bloemfontein, and I started getting into airplanes. I was flying crazy, you know, so building model airplanes hanging in my roof. flying them and tying firecrackers to them, everything that a South African boy does who's besotted with airplanes, you know. But the one thing that I do that not many other kids get to do is we used to go out to Tempe, the old Tempe now, right? The old Tempe Airfield, which was a civilian airfield at the time. And there was a flight school and NAC, National Aviation Company. They run charter flights and scientific survey flights, that kind of thing. They were operating out of there. And then there were a bunch of people who had hangared their private airplanes there, you know. And so myself and my neighbor buddy, who was about my age but in a different school, we'd get on our bikes on a Saturday, pack a lunch with oros and sandwiches, and ride our bicycles out to Tempe Airfield. And by the way, so this would have been 76, 77. And this kid his father was a navigator on Halifaxes during the war in the RAF. And that's all he ever told me. And I think I saw Dad's bomber jacket, but I never could screw up the courage because he was like this real English guy with a handlebar mustache and so on, looking perpetually pissed. And so I never got to ask him about his experiences or anything. And then when I thought about it in the 70s, so 45, 55, 65, it was only 30 years after the war, you know. It was still like, I think now, things that happened to me 30 years ago are still fresh in my memory, kind of, you know. Yeah, I just figured out I've been at Taiwan longer than my birth is from the Battle of Britain, you know. But anyhow, so we used to go out to the airfield, and so we made friends with the pilots there, and they, recognizing themselves in these little, you know, enthusiastic young kids, actually allowed us in. And so we would help to wash the planes and stuff like that. And as you would expect, then we would get flips, you know. So it's like, hey, I'm going up for a half hour to check the automatic direction finder on this plane. You guys want to come along? And so we started flying along with these guys. And so in that time, I flew in as a kid passenger in a lot of like really cool, interesting airplanes, like the Britten Norman Trilender. It's got like 2 engines on the wings and 1 on the back, and the French Rally, which is like an aerobatic airplane and stuff like that. But anyway, so occasionally the Air Force or the Army would use Tempe because I think there wasn't Ian Valskerm Battalion, didn't they have like their stores there or something, Mark? Do you know what was the deal there?
Yeah, well, that the Paras were in Tempe area. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Okay. So they would sometimes use the airstrip to fly practice flights on for skydive for parachutists, you know, for training. And but it happened rarely. I don't actually know where they usually flew from, or maybe it was just they would usually do it in the week, not on the weekend. And maybe it just happened that this was a school holiday or something. I don't know. But anyway, so one day we were there and there were like 2 decks and they were flying a rotation. And these parabats were like lined up on the grass with their kit and everything and their helmets. And so then a duck would land. They would in plane. The duck would go up while the second one lands. And then the guys would all jump. We would look at them through the telemetry scopes, and so they rotated through. So we were like, wow, this is super cool. We're standing there by the wire watching all these goings on for like the whole afternoon, you know. And then finally it was the last flight, and it was dusk. It was getting, you know, it was just that setting sun. Dusty setting sun over Bloemfontein, you know, and the parabats like got onto the plane, and it taxied forward, and it sort of came past where we were, but it's quite a distance off, and it stopped, and the jump master jumped out, and he started like striding towards us, like super serious. And we were like, oh my God, are we in trouble? Are we supposed to not to be here? We were like, literally like, do we grab our bikes and make a run for it, And he like sort of stops halfway, and he's like, super gruff, right? It's like, clearly he's been given an order and he doesn't actually like it. He's like, hey, you guys, come. And we're like, what? Well, what do you mean? He says, you want to go up? Come. And we're like, is it, you come now or I'm going, kind of thing. And we like threw down our bikes right there, and we vaulted over the fence, and we made a run for the plane, And he like sort of like gave us a lift up, because the stairs were already up, and all these parabats were sitting on the sides like that, and we got shunted right to the front onto these metal seats with just this big webbing safety belt, and we could see the pilot sort of through the little door to the cockpit there. And man, this was just the most exciting damn thing. And I'm pretty sure that these parabats were like first timers. They would look super nervous. These guys were like shitting themselves, But yeah, and so then just steep up climbing, even when you're on the ground in the deck, because it's a tail dragger, right? You sit really with the nose high up in the air like that. It's a very strange feeling if you're used to flying airplanes with nose wheel gear, And anyway, got to altitude, and along the way, the jump master got seasick or airsick. He threw up in his little bag there, because then in the back of the plane, obviously there's a lot of bouncing going around there, And then, red light on, calls out, they all get up, they hook on their static lines, and green light, and one by one they go. And I remember, you see on this photo, they used to tape up the side of the plane, just with masking tape. This is green tape, but on this one, they just had masking tape to stop the static lines from scratching the plane too much because when the static lines go out. And so once all the guys are out, the jump master counts shoots to make sure that everybody shoots open, and then they haul in the static lines like in a big bundle again, And to be honest, I don't even remember if that jump master had a bloody safety strap on or something. I was expecting him to like be thrown out any moment. And then, when those guys are out, then that guy pilot just puts it down and just corkscrews it down to come to a landing again, And I never, we landed, kids jumped out, we were like just ecstatic. The jump master was like, yeah, man, fuck off, It's like, you've had your fun, I'm still feeling crap, And I'm just thinking about it. So we had no chance to even say hello or thank you to the pilot. No idea who he is. He probably broke a bunch of rules, although in those days it was probably more easygoing, but still, taking unauthorized passengers on board was obviously not necessarily a good thing. But I just thought, like, what a guy, man. He saw these kids faithfully by the wire the whole day, and he reckoned now they deserve something, and he understood the yearning in our hearts and invited us along for a ride. So, yeah, that was really an experience that stayed with me for a long time.
Tobie, when did you get your PPL?
Yeah, so I, hanging out with the pilots there at Tempe, obviously we just soaked up all the information, and we got stick time. When those guys went up and they took us along, they let us have stick time and let us fly, So by the time I was in matric, I was like, yeah, man, come on, I have to do this. I want this. And I started begging my parents. And they were like, no, it's dangerous and it's expensive and blah, blah, blah. But then, interesting enough, so this was 1980. The government, they thought there was a shortage of pilots, or a looming shortage of pilots in South Africa. And so they actually made subsidies available. And you could get like 50% of your PPL back if you completed it. And so my parents applied for that program, and I started my training at Stellenbosch Airfield in my matric year. So I was just turning 18, and I didn't even have my driver's license yet. And so every weekend I would go flying and building hours and everything. Stellenbosch is just a beautiful airfield, man. It's one of the most beautiful airfields in the world. Really, it's absolutely gorgeous. FASH, FASH. And the instructor there was a woman named Faye Bull. She was British. She was single. She drove a Triumph Spitfire wildly around the tarmac, you know. And yeah, and she was my instructor. And for a while there, I really hated her because we would do spins and the airplane would be doing just crazy stuff. And I'm trying to keep my bearings. And she would be sitting there next to me saying, now count the turns. 1, 2, 3. Now right rudder, nose down, power up. You know, I'm like, why are you so calm? This is terrible. You know, but after a while, I got to really love it. So sometimes I would go up and just do spins by myself just for the hell of it, you know. But yeah, so she was really a character. And then, yeah, so in that December vacation, when I finished high school, I just went and finished up the necessary hours. And there was also just a beautiful experience. A week or two before I was due to go for my check ride for my license, I was coming back from a nav exercise over Stellenbosch, and I looked down, and there was a tiger moth parked by the hangar. And I've always loved tiger moths. I think the tiger moth is one of those absolutely classic British airplane. It's got the lines, it's got that delicacy, it flies like a dream. And you know, it's a 1936 airplane, but it's absolutely a beauty. And I saw this tiger there, and so we landed, and I went to the clubhouse, and the tiger pilot was there, and I, you know, started chatting with him, and wow, and I showed him I had a model of a tiger moth that I'd built and painted up and everything, and how I really dreamed that one day I'm going to own a tiger moth, you know. And along the way, I must have mentioned that I'm going for my check ride in a week's time. And so on the day of my check ride, when I came back, the tiger was parked there again. And he was actually from over the Tweeskloof Mountain, somewhere behind Worcester or one of those places. Anyway, and when I landed, he was there, and he asked the check pilot, did he pass? And the check pilot said, yeah, that was a pretty good pass. And he said, okay, when you finish your paperwork, come. And he took me up in the tiger. And it was just beautiful, man. It was just that moment, and the kindness of this man, and just flying there over Stellenbosch in the sunset with that tiger moth, with the wind in the wires, the wind in your, wearing a helmet, but you're really out in the elements. And they let me fly a little bit. And that plane, you just think left, and then it just goes, So absolutely a fantastic experience. That was really, really beautiful. Yeah. Very blessed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So now I am now a licensed pilot, and I've been called up for my national service for July intake. So now I have 6 months to deal with, and so I've got a part-time job. Not too much of a problem. But naturally, I applied to the Air Force. Now, I didn't have enough math to apply for pilot training, but I thought, national service, I'm actually a qualified pilot. Surely they can make use of me somewhere in the Air Force, more than just some troop from somewhere. But, PV and Seuns, in their wisdom, decided, no, you're just going to the Army, man. And so I was... I had to report at the Skobolos in Kimberley to one ordnance depot, right? What's it called? Number 1 ordnance unit. And Yeah. What's Jesus? Why am my brain suddenly frozen now? One maintenance unit. Sorry, one maintenance unit, Kimberley. Yeah. So it was Ordnance Corps, one maintenance unit for basics. And so this is what it looks like there today. The parade ground was just at the bottom right, where I see there's a truck parked on it now. And those 4 buildings there with the silver roofs, that was our bungalows. And so, so national service for me was definitely one of those things where, okay, you've got to do it. My parents were like, oh, do you want to go to university first and defer your national service? And I was like, nah, I just want to get it over with, I didn't see myself as a big grensvechter, but at the same time, I also, it's your expectation. You got to show that you're a man, right? And so that's one of the ways that you do that. And so I was like, okay, fine. But I'd also become a little bit more sort of politically aware around this time. And, I would call myself gematigd, there's got to be a middle road somewhere that we can make this thing work in this country, and to give our Black brothers and sisters their due civil rights, but without, giving up everything we have and without being murdered in our beds, right? So I was pretty conflicted about it. But I knew ordnance unit, is not a fighting unit. I wasn't going to go to infantry. So I was like, okay, fine. And then at the end of basics, they had us all in the hall, and we were like, okay, we're looking for a driver to go to Pretoria. They would like, people could sort of volunteer for things, but it was just like this, right? And so at that time, my girlfriend was actually living in Pretoria. So when they said a driver in Pretoria, I just, yes, that's me. I'm there. And it so happened, oh yeah, here I am at basics. Fucking roof. So roofs is what the roof can be,
What year was that, Tobie?
So this would be 81. Okay. July 81 intake, yeah.
Right.
So we were still issued with R1s. And yeah, this is just outside the bungalow with my brand new Browns. Anyway, so, okay, I'm going to Pretoria. And it was only, later when I got the paperwork and so on, I was going to be at number 1 EOD school, which is the bomb disposal school, run by, it was under the auspices of Quartermaster General Ammunition, Ammo Corps, EOD school. And so I got into a position where we were only 3 national servicemen in this very small unit. We had a Tupip Loot. For a while, we had a captain, or otherwise a Tupip Loot as the chief instructor, OC kind of thing of the school. And we had 3 or 4 instructors. And then we ran like 4 courses a year. And that was in EOD and IED. So, improvised stuff and conventional stuff. And we would pull in like guest instructors on some of those courses. Some people came for refreshers. So it was a tight little group of operators who actually knew what they were doing, and who, and so for a national serviceman, it was amazing. We didn't have any bullshit stuff. We did have to do a little bit of guard duty with 91 ammo depot, but nothing serious. But otherwise it was like an office job, except we got to make bangs. We got to shoot stuff. And during the courses, I was like, I guess you would call it dispatch clerk. So I had a big whiteboard, the teams up the top, and the locations where we have exercises set up. And then I would dispatch people so that there was always somebody at each of the scenarios, and that nobody was sitting around doing nothing, kind of thing. And then I was on the radio with the teams as an ops room, and they would then radio me with requests. So it was all exercise, but I was told to give them a hard time. So they would say, 0-0, this is 1-0. We request a helicopter at our location. And then I would just say 1-0, this is 0, no helicopter available, out. You know. And so I enjoyed that. It was great. And once every course, we would go out into the bush on Valmanstal, on the farm there, and basically I and one of my buddies would camp out there in our mobile ops room and look after the stuff while the students go into town, and then they come back the next day, kind of thing. And yeah, so like I say, we had all kinds of captured weapons and stuff that I got to shoot with and play with, RPGs and RPDs and Thompson machine gun that had been taken off a tour in the bush somewhere, right? It was in terrible condition. It was a 45 ACP Thompson machine gun. Like, where the hell did he get that from, you know? So I did the EOD course. So you were supposed to be, you could only be an operator if you were like sergeant and higher. But because the three of us were working there, basically, they let us do the course. We just couldn't be classified as operators, kind of thing. So yeah, no, that was very cool. So the only thing really that happened, because I was sitting there again, I was in my mind, I was like, okay, this I can be comfortable with in my own mind, because EOD is saving lives, it's not taking lives, you know. So, but even there, I mean, like for many of us, right, going to national service, especially if you are, you know, I mean, we were certainly not from an upper class family at all. We were like totally middle class, which is kind of what made it more frightening. But, you know, we read books and we talked about those books, and we did crossword puzzles as a family together and listened to music and that kind of thing. And then being thrown into a bungalow with, like, you know, the whole of South Africa's demographic, and, you know, these guys from PE who just like talk all the time about smoking Zol, and they worked on the railways and stuff like that, and just really realizing that we were actually quite privileged, even just within where I was, you know. So that was definitely yeah. Anyhow, so as I say, morally, I was like, okay, this is cool. But in basics, already there were things like, we had one guy who was there who should never have been there to begin with. He was clearly mentally challenged, and how they didn't just make him G4K4 immediately and send him home, I don't know. But he stayed for like 2 weeks, during which time he was mercilessly bullied. Mercilessly, you know. And I felt so bad. But, you know, I was a scrawny 60-kilogram guy at that time, and you know, what can you do, you know, when you're in that sort of group mentality thing, you know. And there was a guy who was gay, who was similarly assaulted and eventually shipped out and went to work in an office somewhere or something, you know. So those kind of things like really pissed me off already. And then even there at the EOD school, there were some people who would just on principle be like just super rude with the black staff there. We had a couple of black cleaners and a T-boy, you know, we literally had a T-boy, you know. And people would like literally just call him the K word. And he was like a worthy old black gentleman, you know. And so that, like, I was like, come on, man, come on, guys, you know, let's not do this, you know. But anyway, so then there were some minor incidents where we got called out for things. One of them briefly was there was a place in Krugersdorp that would get in vehicles that had come from the border that had been like in fights or in explosions, and then they would repair them. You know, they would rebuild them basically. So these are the ones that came back really, really bad, you know. And so that was a big workshop and so on there. But they were, I believe they were a private contractor, actually. And so one time we got a call that a buffalo had come in that had been in a mine or whatever. And when they started dismantling it, under the floorboards, they were in the water tank under the floor of the buffalo, they found a bunch of munitions. So clearly the troopies had been collecting grenades and shit and had hidden them there with the thought of smuggling them back to the States when they got out, which was a thing that happened quite commonly. Our EOD people were regularly called out to the toilets at the Wonderboom airport because troopies would get to there on the Flossie and then realize, oh shit, there's a metal detector you have to go through, and then they would dump their shit in the toilet, you know, like in the corner somewhere. You'd come there and we'd like M26 grenades, and sometimes they'd have the freaking pins out and just like a matchstick holding it in or shit like that, you know. Yeah. But anyway, so we got this call from this place in Krugersdorp, and so what had happened was they found this stuff, and one of the workers fucked around with the stuff and popped a white phosphorus grenade in his hands, right? And so we had a vehicle with big sign on the front and back saying authorized to exceed the speed limit, blah blah blah, and a blue light. And so we went through, and when we got there, they'd already taken his body away. He died on the site. They'd already taken his body away. And I just remember there was literally just this black burnt sooty spot on the ground, and the zips from his overall was like curled up there. Otherwise, that was like nothing, you know. And so we just collected the other stuff that was in that vehicle and just blew it on the site, you know. But then another thing that we dealt with were limpid mines, and so limpid mines became a big thing around that period, 81, 82, going into 83 now. And we were working on all kinds of ways to try to defeat them. So firstly, actually detecting them was a big problem because they could very easily be hidden. You can imagine a gray half cylinder like that stuck to a pipe in a gas plant or something would be very difficult to spot, you know. And then the other thing was how to get rid of the thing. So the best they came up with in the time that I was there was a freaking metal clamp that you went up to it. You physically had to go up to it and go clonk onto it, which shaking could well set it off, and then run back with a rope and pull it off with the rope, you know. Anyway, so we worked a lot with the CSIR in doing research for them, basically field testing stuff for them. They were working on a remote vehicle. This was in 91 Ammo Depot, you know. They were working on a remote vehicle. We had old British Mark II wheelbarrows, they were called. That was a remote vehicle that we used, but the CSIR was working on a South African version called COCON. And I never heard what became of COCON, whether it actually ever went into production. But then on 1982, May 22nd, was it? We had the Church Street car bomb. And so we were at the EOD school, which is just outside Pretoria on a place called Magazine Hill. Used to be an munitions factory during the Second World War. And there was a huge explosion one night. It was still, you know, nobody found out why. There was a huge explosion up there and like 36 people were killed. And since then, they always said that place was haunted and there were ghosts around there. And anyway, we'll talk about that later. But so, yeah, so these ANC operatives parked a car in Church Street opposite the Air Force headquarters building. And the car went off early. The bomb went off early. Apparently, the idea was they would exit the vehicle, arm it, and then when they were a safe distance away, they would pop it. But the guy was sitting in the vehicle when he armed it, and it went off right away. That's what they afterwards now thought, figured out what happened. And that was 30-something kilos of TNT, which is a chunk, you know. So we heard the boom, our windows rattled, even though we were like, 10, 15 kilos as the crow flies away. And then we saw this plume of smoke going up, and we're like, yeah, that's a big one. And we just got into the vehicle and went for it. And so on the site, we arrived there probably about 15 minutes or so after. Absolute, chaos on the site. Windows blown in, buildings, cars, everything blown out. People bleeding in the streets. And most of the wounds was from flying glass, right? So all the windows in that entire street block had blown inwards, because an explosion, it just sucks out all the air in the area away from it, right? And so all the windows and blinds, as you can see there on the picture on the top right, there's all blinds and everything just blew out. And so we were told to check for other bombs because, it's very possible that there's one car bomb and then they wait a little bit and then the next one goes. And so, so we were walking through the wreckage, going past cars, looking inside, looking to see if you see something that's suspicious, a wire or whatever, but you have no way of knowing. It could be in the boot and completely enclosed, and it could go off the moment you stop next to it, But so, times like that, you just focus on what you got to do, keep on moving. And so we did that, and thank God we didn't find another bomb. And so eventually, after they'd removed all the bodies and the casualties and so on, we headed back. And, I was so focused and so just dissociating all the other stuff that was going on, and it was only when I got to my room that night and I sat down on the bed and I saw that my boots was full of blood and glass, and it suddenly sort of like came back to me, the memory of my boots walking over glass going crunch, crunch, crunch like that, because that street was, there was a layer of glass in that entire street. And there was areas where there was literally blood running in the gutters, So those visuals really only came back to me that night when I was sitting in my room. And then, like the next day, I think it was also a turning point for me, also politically. And now most people's reaction when you witness something like this is one of hate, right? It's like, oh my God, we must get these guys and we must hang them up by their balls. People come up with the most horrific things that they would like to do to the people who did this, but for me, I think it really just brought home that this is something we have to solve. This is not something that we're going to, Afrikaans wil alles reg moer, And I just thought to myself, that's just not going to work. There are too many of South Africa. The white people are a minority. The vast majority want things to change, and we're not going to hold this wall, as it were, against that. And it came to me that if we can solve this peacefully, that will be just so much better than trying to keep on with this, trying to donor alles reg,
Thanks very much, Tobie. I think we'll leave it there for now, and we'll cover your CF, your Citizen Force time, in the townships and things next time. and then also your life in Namibia, Southwest,
Right.
I think, when you were still there.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, mate.
All right.
Thank you so
Catch
much,
soon.
Toby.
Thanks, John.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
No,
Cheers.
thank you guys for the opportunity and for listening. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Okay,
Thanks.
bye now.
Bye.